Good morning. Welcome to the CUNA Advocacy Update for April 27, 2020. I'm Ryan Donovan, CUNA's Chief Advocacy Officer. Here are 3 things you need to know about credit union advocacy this week. The Paycheck Protection Program resumes today. The Federal Reserve has suspended the Regulation D transfer limits. And credit union priorities in the Phase 4 stimulus and recovery legislation are coming into focus. On Friday, President Trump signed legislation adding $310 billion to the Paycheck Protection Program, including a $60 billion set aside for small lenders. The SBA began processing applications earlier this morning. The $60 billion set aside is something that CUNA and the leagues had called for in previous engagements with Congress, and it ensures that small lenders can provide access to funds for Main Street businesses. Now, this program has certainly not been without its challenges, but we know credit unions are doing their part. In fact, according to a recent survey of PPP lending credit unions, the average loan size from credit unions is approximately $64,000, which means that credit unions are serving precisely the types of businesses whose employees this program was designed to help. Last week, the Federal Reserve suspended the Regulation D transfer limits. This move should make it easier for consumers to access funds and savings accounts remotely. We appreciate the Fed's decision here. You know, it comes frankly after years of advocacy by credit unions, leagues, and CUNA. I can recall working on this issue as far back as 2012. So we're very happy that the Fed has made this move, because this transfer limit, which is purportedly a tool that the Fed uses to affect monetary policy, has really become more like that tool on your workbench that just takes up space and never gets used. It's not clear how long the Fed will keep this limit suspended, but if they intend to reinstate it, there will need to be a rulemaking process, and we'll actively discourage its reinstatement. I mentioned last week that we had sent a letter to House Financial Services Committee Chairwoman Maxine Waters, reacting to her Phase 4 priorities and outlining our priorities in the next round of stimulus and recovery legislation. We had some additional interaction with her committee staff last week, and so we followed up on our letter with an additional communication that really focuses in on 2 key issues: member business lending and credit union liquidity. We urge Congresswoman Waters to include H.R. 6550 in her Phase 4 bill. This is legislation that would temporarily lift the member business lending cap for 3 years, keeping it narrowly focused on loans related to COVID-19. We also urged her to include language that would expand on recent changes made to the Central Liquidity Facility. You may recall that in March, Congress enacted legislation, it was a Phase 3 bill, that would allow the CLF to borrow up to 16 times the paid-in capital of the fund. And it also made it easier for credit unions to access the Central Liquidity Facility through corporate credit unions. These changes are in effect through the end of the year. What we asked Congresswoman Waters in our letter was to extend that sunset through the end of 2021 and expand the borrowing authority for the CLF to 25 times the paid-in capital. Now that Congress has re-upped the Paycheck Protection Program, we expect that the Phase 4 legislation will take firmer shape, and it could be considered at some point in May. Around us, everything's changing. The way that we interact with our members, the way that we interact with each other, and certainly the way that we conduct advocacy. We've taken for granted the meetings with members of Congress and their staffs, the town hall meetings, the fly-ins, the district office visits, the receptions. All of these are impossible to do right now, and will likely take on a different form in the future. But advocacy continues, and our interactions with policymakers remain critical. CUNA and the leagues have been engaged in a number of video conferences with members of Congress and their staffs. We participate in daily briefings with the administration and congressional officials. Last week, Jim Nussel presented at a briefing with the Blue Dog Coalition in the House of Representatives, and he spoke to the CFPB Director, Kathy Kreninger. I'm in almost daily contact with NCUA and Small Business Administration officials. The work continues, and the opportunities to plug into that work remain for credit union employees, executives, and volunteers. It can take on many forms: participating in a virtual town hall organized by a member of Congress or your state credit union association, sending an email to your member of Congress, telling your credit union story on social media or in the local news channels, responding to a survey or request for information to help us tell the credit union story. There are many ways to be involved in advocacy so that we're able to make sure that credit unions remain in a position to serve their members during and, importantly, after the crisis. Speaking of our survey, the CUNA League COVID-19 survey remains open. This is an important tool to help us tell the credit union story on Capitol Hill and with other policymakers. And if you haven't already filled out the survey, please take a couple of minutes to do so. There's a link at the bottom here. Can't click on it, but you can type it into your browser, do it the old school way. If you haven't already done so, please take some time to do that. And if you have, and maybe you've got some new or additional information, take a couple minutes to fill it out again. We'll take care of cleaning up the data. I hope this update has been helpful. If you have any questions or concerns during the week, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks for spending some time with me, and have a great week.